It's hard to know the way forward when we can't agree on where we are. So I mentioned the genetic nature of diabetes. I mentioned the inflammatory nature of diabetes. When you look at the research that's coming out, looking at type 2 or looking at type 1, a lot of assumptions are made on the nature of what the respective diseases are. So if you're a type 1, chances are you've been told at some point in your life that it's genetic and that there's nothing you can do about it. That's why, all of our eggs have been put in the stem cell and transplant basket. But when you look a little bit closer at the genetic nature and the genetic background of the development of type 1 diabetes, it is very weak and it is very incomplete. So, of the genes that have been isolated as making someone more susceptible to type 1 diabetes, only 5% of the people with those genes actually developed diabetes. 5%. So that's not strong enough for me to label it as something genetic, right? And so when you look at the research, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, when you create a model in animals to study the genetic nature of diabetes, you have to take that information that they're finding with a grain of salt, because they're basing it on something that is incomplete to begin with. The same goes for the inflammatory model for diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, we're focusing so much on manipulating the liver, whether it be glucagon-like peptide, GLP-1, low fat, high carb, only, high fat, low carb, low fat diet. It's like no one can get their story straight as to how to address the inflammation going on in diabetes. And with any advancements in, say, the genetic nature of diabetes or any advancements in the inflammatory nature of diabetes, there is no crosstalk between the two fields. So as a type 1 diabetic, if I'm hearing research come out on the inflammatory model for type 2, I pay less attention to that because I feel like it doesn't apply to me. Meanwhile, there's a lot of very useful information going out in that I can use, because if you look closer, like I've been mentioning with the genetic nature, type 1 is also inflammatory. It has inflammatory bases, so you can't just throw everything going on with type 2 out the window the same way that maybe there is a genetic component to type 2, and the things that they're learning in the type 1 model can be applied and helpful in the type 2 model. So we've just kind of cemented ourselves in a stance that we were uncertain with to begin with. But because we've kind of like, okay, we're going with this, and we've just piled so much research into these two models, what was initially, well, we'll wait and see, has become something that we have not gone back to check, right? And that's an issue. So, this is the progression number one that people tend to accept for type 1 diabetics. It's in your genes. There's nothing you could do. You got the genes, your beta cells fail. And then what happens is you become inflamed, those beta cells get targeted, and then your life after that is just a series of exogenous insulin and symptom management. Same goes for type 2. Environmental factors, whether, it's a lifestyle disease, right? So lack of exercise, poor diet, poor stress management, that leads to inflammation, that leads to obesity, and that inflammation leads to beta cell failure. And then you're kind of in this chronic positive feedback loop of inflammation leading to more inflammation, leading to more inflammation, leading to more insulin resistance, leading to more insulin resistance.